Welcome to another episode of Mastering the Game Inside Coaching Minds. I'm your host, Dr. Jeremy Bruick, and today we're going to welcome back Coach Mike Fuline. He's our men's head basketball coach here at the University of Mount Union. We're going to look at the core of coaching motivation, and Coach Fuline is going to share his expertise on how he tailors his coaching strategies to the dynamic of both individuals and his teams. So you're not going to want to miss this conversation. Let's just get right into it with Coach. So welcome, Coach.
Thank you again for having me.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about motivation, and I just wonder broadly, what does motivation mean to you in coaching, and how does it shape your approach?
Jeremy, I think that's why I got into coaching. I think motivating student athletes, when I was younger, my form of motivation was obviously a little different than it is now in my late 40s. But our teams were always ready to play, especially at the high school level, because I think there is a way you can flip a switch, especially in a pregame type of talk, to get your guys. Now, you don't want them to be too emotional, right. But there's a nice little balance there, the understanding, that no regret type of thing. And there were many times coaches will still tell me, a lot of my older assistants, some of them should have been videotaped. I'm glad they were not, but nowadays they probably would be. Yeah. But we would get ourselves motivated in a way, and it'd motivate me too, as a coach. You have to have an edge. I think when you listen to the Kobe Bryants, the Michael Jordans, even when I talked to Larry Karras, they find things as players and coaches to upset them, to get them motivated, to just get that little edge, and sometimes when you're a really good player, all you need is that little extra motivation. And it's the same as in coaching. Now, as the years have gone on, there are certainly certain athletes who you need to motivate differently. I think there's an approach where, the scare tactic, or you're sitting, or Bobby Knight once said, the greatest motivation is the wooden bench sitting right next to him. And there is some truth to that. But I think different athletes, some of them, want to just know that you care about them, that you believe in them, that you have their back. And I think as the years have gone on, it's way more that way, right? There's way more athletes who would rather you just show that you care, because they care how you feel about them. So the motivation, has to be dictated by the individual player. And then as a team, you can motivate them, as a team. But once you start getting into individuals, there's different ways to motivate people. There's just so many different ways to do it. And then, if there's a guy or a girl who's motivated by just their training, I can see, again, Kobe Bryant. So then you have to align some of the ways you coach, based on the criteria that some of these individual players have. Right. And as you go through coaching, and obviously the students, as they go through their years of coaching, the one thing that you'll learn is there is not a certain way to motivate that's better than another way. You have to be who you are as an individual. But the days of screaming and yelling and threatening athletes has gone by the wayside. I mean, there still needs to be discipline. There still needs to be accountability. But those old school days, you see a lot of these coaches getting out now, and the great ones changed. I go back to Larry. I mean, Larry Karras was, he was a tough dude. He still is. Mm-hmm. Don't get me wrong. Right. But his way, I watched it in my 13 years here. Just how he had to change to be more, acclimated to the situations, to the student athletes that, how they are now. So motivation's a big deal. The training through the motivation, specific individuals, how they need to be motivated, is a big deal. And as a coach, it's something you learn and develop.
That's interesting about the adaptations that you're saying coaches need to make and really have to make. In our text, we talked about motivation theories like achievement motivation and goal theory. So is there anything that you could talk to us a little bit about? Do you use achievement motivation or goal theory as a coach, and how so?
I do think there's a way both can work, right? So as a team, you have these team goals, right? The team goal should be to win, right? Win the game. And then all the things that come with winning, working hard, don't be late, all those goals.
Yep.
And then I think it's okay. Like, I learned this at an early age. Like, it's okay there are some athletes who want first team all state. There's some athletes who want first team all league. And if that's their motivation, I don't think you should shy away from that, right?
Right.
That shouldn't overcome, the team goal, which I think has happened, as the years have gone on. Sometimes that becomes more important than the ultimate team goal. But as a coach, like I tell our guys, you're allowed to have specific individual goals. I mean, why wouldn't you do that? I mean, my son and I did that for him this year.
Right.
What's some of your individual goals? The number one goal is to win the game.
Right.
All right. Individually, how can you work? How can you get into certain situations where you can earn these types of other accolades that you might be interested in?
Yep.
And that was that wasn't a motivation we talked about other than at the beginning of the year.
Yep.
All right. Now it's time to go play and perform, and then do what's best for the ultimate team goal. So Coach Karras would always tell me, excellence gets rewarded. Right. He'd just preach that to me.
Right.
So one of my daughters, she was struggling in school, and he was like, hey, just motivate her.
Right.
Like, if she gets an A, what can you do? Well, at the time, she was a young kid. She loved milkshakes.
Mm-hmm.
So, she get an A or a B, we'd go get a milkshake at her favorite place.
Yep.
So that kind of stuck with her, right?
Yep.
And as much as, and I know we'll talk about it a little bit later, we want that to be an intrinsic motivation, right? Something that just comes from inside of you. At times, there's an extrinsic one too.
Yep.
You have to have the carrot to kind of get them to where you want to go. Another example is, we have student athletes on campus, on my team, on other teams, that if it wasn't the motivation of playing a sport, they probably wouldn't be in college. Right? So I've had so many first-time family graduates, right? So they're the first in their family to do that, and the sport is what got them here. So that was the carrot that dangled it. Like, who cares? We want you to get a degree, and experience, success on and off the basketball floor. Who cares how you get there, as long as we get there in some way. So, motivation comes in different, like, there are parents, I'm surrounded by families where I live.
Yep.
Like, that motivation is like you're going to do this type of deal, and, just in a family dynamic that they're in, which educationally or athletically. So, I think it's kind of cool. I don't think as coaches we run away from the individual goals and a player having some of these rewards at the end of a season, as long as that doesn't overcome the ultimate, right? The ultimate goal should be on a team, should be for that team, to win the game.
Right. Team first, and then individual, it plays a big
Absolutely.
part of it. So, right. So as we're talking about kind of individuals on this team, do you have to find yourself balancing what athletes want to do to get better, like their task orientation, and then managing that competitive spirit? Do you ever have players that are too competitive or let their ego take over?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, all the time, right? So we call them alphas, right? And I think it is important. We had a year that we had a really good season, but it wasn't as great as it could be because there was no alpha. Mm-hmm. And we've had other years where you have like 3 alphas, right? And they all want to be the person who helps their team win.
Right.
The best teams have the alphas who understand the situation. And I think as coaches, we have to understand, this game may depend on this guy. There's a better matchup, right?
Right.
You have a wide receiver who can get open, and you have a great running back.
Right.
Well, this may be a game where we throw the ball more because that's what the game plan dictates.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to be able to specify that, right? To be able to understand as coaches whose day it might be, and still, and afterward, guess what? I'll give you a great example. We had a guy who scored in the tournament, NCAA tournament. Many of the people on here probably remember this, but we had a guy that broke the team school record, had 49 points one night. We played the next night to get to the Sweet 16. They chased him all over. He couldn't get open. He had 0.
Wow.
But our point guard had 53. and
Wow.
set the school record the next day.
Wow.
Right? So 2 alphas. Did that bother the guy that had 0? Absolutely. You could see it.
Yep.
And I just pull him to the side. I'm like, listen, you can be so mad at me after this, but I just kind of need you to stand right in that corner because you're drawing so much attention. You're the one who's creating this.
Yep.
And then it took a couple hours, but after you win, right, and things go your way, and you kind of sit down, and then you tell the reporters how important his role was, even though he had 0 points.
Yep.
Then it starts to make sense. But while you're in it, buddy, it's tough.
Sure.
It's tough, and I accept that, and that's what makes coaching difficult at times.
Yep. Well, hopefully you got that guy a milkshake, Coach.
Yeah, maybe 2.
Exactly. I'm wondering about times where your team is dealing with motivation challenges, like they're just not motivated. How do you turn them around? What do you do to flip the switch?
Yeah, that's a great one. The one thing that you can't coach is effort, right?
Right.
You just can't, and we say that all the time. And there's days throughout the season where it's just those. It's cold outside. You're on a bus. You're traveling 4 hours. How do you get yourself self-motivated for that?
Yeah.
And that's hard. But I think as you get into college and you're a college athlete, that's on you to find what gets you going.
Right.
Maybe it's thinking about your mom or your dad or someone who passed away or whatever it is. For those 2 hours to become in a rage of this is the most important thing right now. But slumps are very real. Our national championship Final Four game, right? Mm-hmm. We're in the Final Four, and we're down 22 in the first half. I think we cut it to like 15 or 16 at halftime. We're playing a really good team, and we get. And I wasn't going to scream and yell at halftime. There was a few things technically maybe we changed a little bit, but beyond that, it was just a challenge of. And all I said was, "Hey, I know this. My family's in the stands." And I'm embarrassed that we're not even trying.
Right.
I see all your families painted up, purple, screaming, tears in their eyes, and we can't even play hard. We can't even compete a little harder, than this. This is what we're going to give them. This is what all this hard work is for them to kind of be sad and embarrassed. Yep. And before I was even done, a couple of our guys stood up and kind of pushed me to the side, brought them in, and that 14 points was to even within the first 6 minutes of the second half, and we went on to win it. Because sometimes you just need to you gotta smack them out of their own minds.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, just, hey man, this is important. This is stop thinking so much. Play with the motion. I coach with the motion, maybe too much sometimes, and I want my teams to play with the motion.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of coaches who are not like that, and I respect them as well. They're, you can't get too hype or too low. Well, we're going to come ready to play, man. I'm going to get you there, eventually, even if I have to make things up sometimes.
Yeah. So it sounds to me like you do have these strategies sometimes that you're using to try to adapt your team, to adapt their behavior, to adapt their thoughts, to try to even use their feelings, like you're here playing for your family. And I don't know that they like what they see. So it sounds to me like that's pretty important.
This past team, our families were so close, right? They were so tight.
Yep.
And we had a lot of strong mothers, man, and aunts, and and our guys loved their mothers as they should.
Yeah.
And he challenged them sometimes with it, and you get a different beast, know, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It wasn't a tactic. I truly meant it. Like, hey, man, if we're going out, let's go fight or something. Like, let's not go out like this.
Yeah.
And for that moment, it certainly helped.
Yeah. So I know that you had kind of alluded to this earlier, but I'd like to talk to you a little bit about extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. Do you see that athletes have different types of motivation, or what are your experiences managing that type of intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation?
Right. Well, I think even as fathers, right, you would agree with me. We want our children to have, like, it's inside of you, man. I want you to be great because you want to be great. Like, you and And I see that in our players, and I'm telling you, it's so vast, right?
Mm-hmm.
You see the guys who have that toughness, right? That just internal, like I'm going to prove you wrong. I should be playing more. I'm going to help us win this game. I'm going to get bigger, stronger, and faster, just because they want to do it. And then there are many other guys, like we talked about earlier, that it's more of the, man, maybe this girl will call me, maybe I'll win, first team all league.
Yep.
Maybe they'll put me on the radio. And listen, they're both okay.
Right.
I think what we have to try to develop as coaches is to find that extrinsic motivation, that external motivation, and the interest, and find that middle. There has to be some type of middle ground, because as I tell my guys, like, I'm not going to always be here to yell and scream at you, or our coaches. Like, there's not always going to be a newspaper. There's not going to be 2,000 fans while you're sitting at a desk evaluating every move that you make.
Right.
So at some point, internally, you got to want to be great for you. And as they get older, you just start seeing it, right? That competitiveness, whether it was an intrinsic motivation, now has become what's inside of them to be successful in business and life, as a father, as a husband.
Yep.
So it's a cool dynamic to witness and to see those two kind of come together.
Yeah, and I think that's just a really great point. We think about the mission of our institution, to do meaningful work is really what we're working at the Mount Union to do. It's right in our mission statement, and we look at it on the walls all the time. And what you're saying there is exactly that. Sure, you might be motivated from something outside, but eventually we're getting to a point where you're motivated internally and you're going to succeed at whatever you do, not just on my basketball court or on my lacrosse field or wherever we're at, right? So
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, hey, great thoughts again this time, Coach. Really appreciate your time, the wealth of knowledge and experience that you're always sharing with us. I want to thank you again for joining us on this episode of Mastering the Game, and we'll see you again next time.
Look forward to it. Thank you.
Thanks, Coach. Appreciate it.